Longmont began as a small agricultural community and grew as industries such as flour milling, vegetable canning, and sugar manufacturing prospered. And whereas forward-thinking early residents established an enduring legacy and ensured future success by creating their own electric utility and securing extensive water rights, demonstrating a pioneering spirit that lives on in Longmont's trailblazing next-light gigabit broadband network. And whereas the community transformed in the years after World War II with the arrival of high-technology employers and many new residents. And whereas Longmont has faced many challenges, including fire, flood, discrimination, economic hardship, and pandemic disease, and its people have overcome those challenges, building a stronger, more resilient community, affirmed by Longmont twice being recognized as an All-America city. And finally, whereas over its 150-year history, Longmont has grown into a city of almost 100,000 residents who work together to sustain a caring, inclusive community, proud to embrace, support, respect, and celebrate each other. Now, therefore, I, Brian J. Bagley, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim February 2nd, 2021 as Longmont Day, and the entire year of 2021 a year of celebration of Longmont's sesquicentennial celebration. So, in conclusion, I just want to wish our wonderful town that I chose to move here to and raise a family happy birthday. And so at this time, I'd now like to turn the time over to our host, Karen Stollard.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. It is a true honor to be here tonight. I can't tell you how excited I was. I will tell you when I take that off. Great. I can't tell you how excited I was to be invited here tonight. I've got 150 dresses, and I can't wear one. Obviously, Longmont's 150th birthday is a historic and memorable milestone, but it gave me an excuse to dress up for Longmont's sequin centennial. Oh, sorry, it's sesquicentennial. Nailed it. All right, well, it truly is an honor to be here at this celebration this evening and represent the Longmont Chamber of Commerce. It seems fitting, after all, since just a mere decade ago, we ourselves celebrated our quasquicentennial. Here we go again. Quasquicentennial. I feel like we just did this. Maybe this is what happens when your city's birthday falls on Groundhog Day. You just are in an infinite loop of really hard words. Okay, moving along. We have put together a beautiful evening of tribute to Longmont and the diverse people who have called and continue to call this lovely place home. I was actually born and raised in Longmont, and so I really am looking forward to my conversations with Longmont locals whose roots run deep here, showing you all some videos of tributes from old friends in California, Japan, and Mexico. We'll even crack open a time capsule and do some singing, and of course, there's gonna be cake. It is now my pleasure to introduce Montoya Whitman, who is going to remind us all of the people who called this place home for centuries before all of the folks from Chicago moved in. Please join me in welcoming Montoya Whitman. Montoya Whitman is an enrolled member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. She's a freelance writer and photographer whose stories and images have appeared in magazines and websites such as the American Indian Graduate Magazine, Winds of Change Magazine, DiversityCom, and the Cheyenne and Arapaho Tribal Tribune. She is currently Senior Director of Marketing at the American Indian Science of Engineering and Engineering Society and serves as a member of the Indigenous Community Advisory Council at the Denver Art Museum, a Leadership Council member with the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, and more recently, a consultant to the Longmont Museum. In her spare time, Montoya enjoys exploring Colorado with her rescue dog, Tazzy, and being active in the outdoors, taking landscape and wildlife photography. Ladies and gentlemen, Montoya Whitman.
Piva ishiv machginat de sistas. Hano ha'e. Good day. My Cheyenne name is Corn Tassel Woman. My English name is Montoya Whitman. Today is a day of celebration that the Longmont Museum staff have been preparing for a while. That includes a well-planned program and the timely launch of the Curator of History, Erik Mason's book, Longmont, the First 150 Years. I congratulate the Longmont Museum and others on this event. I am very glad to be here. My instructions were to relate as best as I can how Native Americans lived in the Front Range and still live in the Front Range, and to do my best to share some history and describe how family life was 150 years ago, which is roughly 1871. Next slide. My children, here it is, I hand it to you, the earth, the earth. This is an Arapaho song. This song might be sung at a child's birth ceremony or reinforced as an indigenous teaching about the interconnectedness to Mother Earth and deep respect for the land. The earth is loved, water is sacred. Our lives are filled with creation stories and our interactions with the animals and other beings with whom we share this space. Traditional environmental knowledge is the unique understanding of the relationship of human beings, of living beings, human and non-human, with one another and with the environment. Next slide. Land acknowledgement. The Blue Sky people, the Arapaho, and the people of beauty, the Cheyenne, have lived on Turtle Island since time immemorial. Many generations have inhabited the Rocky Mountain region in large family groups, enjoying its abundant resources, sacred beauty, and rhythmic cycles of the seasons. The Cheyenne and Arapaho, as relatives and allies, are linked in history, courage, resiliency, pride, survival, and place. The value systems and love that was put into their families and communities is still here. Today, I honor my ancestors and esteemed family in recognizing our homeland. I express my gratitude to the ancestors for the life that was given to each of us. Neish Mathil, the Longmont Museum, and community members for this time to speak my truth, my peace. I pray we all grow and that we all connect. Help us to learn for ourselves what we are made so we can experience things fully. Next slide. I would like to share with you my family genealogy. I am the daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of Arapaho chiefs and leaders and Cheyenne chiefs and holy people. In the slide are my parents, maternal and paternal grandfathers, and great-great-grandmother and great-great-grandfather. The woman in the black and white photo is White Buffalo Woman, who is my great-great-grandmother on my maternal side. She lived in Colorado with Chief Black Kettle's clan. White Buffalo Woman was a midwife and horse doctor, earliest form of a veterinarian. In her journey through time, she married and lived in areas now known as Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, and Oklahoma. She is a survivor of the Sand Creek Massacre and the Washita, who lived to 85 years. In the cradle board on her lap is my mother. At the top, my right, your left, is a photo of Chief Little Raven. He is my great-great-grandfather on my paternal side. He was chief of the Southern Arapahoes who lived along the banks of Cherry Creek. He signed several treaties with the U.S., namely the treaty at Fort Wise, the treaty at the Arkansas, and the treaty at Medicine Lodge. He was a peacemaker and a leader. Denver's lower downtown is named in his honor. Arapaho County is named after his tribe, and he lived to age 79. In the middle are my grandfathers, Henry Mancini, who served in the U.S. Army and Patton's infantry. He was at the Battle of the Bulge, and he received a Purple Heart for his injuries that he sustained while in the Netherlands. He was a member of the Bowstring Warrior Society and the Native American Church, and he lived in Oklahoma until his departure at age 83. Alfred Whiteman Sr., also known as Alfred Whiteshirt, is my paternal grandfather who was an Arapaho chief and tribal councilman representing the Arapaho people. He and his 4 sons were all military veterans. Grandpa served in World War I in France, and he lived in Oklahoma till age 81. My parents served on the Cheyenne and Arapaho Council. Alfred Whiteman Jr., who was a renowned multimedia artist who worked at the University of Oklahoma. He served in the U.S. Navy, and he lived to age 52. Dr. Henrietta Mann is a National Cheyenne Educator Treasurer. At age 86, Dr. Mann is a retired professor from the Montana State System. She has served on many national boards like the National Museum of the American Indian, First Nations Museum, the Seventh Generation Fund. She is a Circle One Legacy Leader with the Spirit Aligned Leadership Award Program, and she is a Cheyenne Prayer Woman. Their leadership connects and has connected people from various backgrounds, and they are all part of the U.S. history as well as Cheyenne and Arapaho tribal histories. Next slide. I shared this proverb with you to reinforce that home rested on the women. Daily work fell solely to the women who took care of the home. It says the proverb is that a nation is not conquered until its women's hearts are on the ground. Cheyenne women were industrious workers, rising before sunrise and bedding well past sunset. They prepared all of the clothing, they prepared all of the food, and they gathered much of it also. They took care of the horses. They manufactured saddles, cured buffalo robes, teepee coverings, and raised and broke camp. As food preparers, you could say that they were the top champions of the plains. The Arapahoes and Cheyennes wintered in the Longmont Boulder region, so they prepared food for winter, and it was very important to the survival of the tribes. Through the spring and fall, they gathered and dried wild chokecherries, currants, cattail roots, and more. They made buffalo jerky with fat, marrow, and chokecherry paste. Through the winter, these foods kept the people healthy, especially from scurvy. Next slide. The Cheyenne and Arapaho were a people of beauty physically and materialistically. They had fine homes, fine home goods, clothing, and horses. Today, I issue a call to the Longmont Museum guests to explore the art, history, and literature of the Cheyenne and Arapaho and the other tribes that were in the Colorado area as well as our nation. Visit the Longmont Museum because it has a Native American exhibit that was developed in partnership with many Denver Metro Indigenous community members. Explore the writings of Tommy Orange, the music of Gary Small, the artwork of Harry Pratt, Nathan Hart, and Bethany Yellowtail. Next slide. Living in the Longmont area 150 years ago was a time of exploration and learning for children. It is said that children under age 4, their feet never touched the earth, as there was a large kinship circle of aunties, brothers, sisters, and others to care for them. Children were precious as they were the future. Their cradles were made with quills dyed in vivid colors. Cheyenne and Arapaho women were some of the most prolific and skilled bead designers and creators ever seen. Pictured are Cheyenne children who had the finest clothing and who were taught tribal values, customs, ceremonies, handed down from generation to generation. Next slide. As you can imagine, there was no television, no internet, no gaming, so how did children occupy themselves? In this slide are more examples of how children were loved and outrageously spoiled. They had a deep sense of belonging to their family and their community. Young girls played house, as we used to call it, where they had miniaturized teepees, beaded dolls, and beaded cradle boards. Pictured in the slide is an Arapaho child's toy from the 19th century, a toy bison. It is made from wood, sticks, buffalo hide, and hair, and with beaded eyes and mouth, and the horns were badger claws. Next slide. Hananoa chiefs and leaders were respected. They respected the rights of the citizens, they listened to the needs, and they helped their fellow citizens to adapt to changes or threats happening in their environment. Chief Left Hand Niwot was born in the early 1820s, and he lived in the Rocky Mountain region almost his entire life in the area, particularly in Boulder and Longmont. He was multilingual who spoke Arapaho, other tribes' languages, and English. He had a deep sense of belonging to their family and the community. Chief Little Raven was a man of peace who was a skilled negotiator between tribes and those of the Cheyenne, Kiowa, and the Comanche. They were leaders during one of the most critical periods in history. Next slide. Tsistas chiefs today function more in a ceremonial role, and their leadership is critical to the spiritual health and well-being of the Cheyenne people. Today, the Sundance Ceremony is held in communities in Oklahoma and in Montana. Pictured here is Jerry Small, the first woman elected as a tribal president of the Northern Cheyenne tribe. Reggie Wasana is now the current governor of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma, who was elected to a 4-year term. And the final slide. This slide is a resource, but it's also a call to action. Earlier, I issued a call to action to learn more about the tribes in your region. There are 574 federally recognized tribes and state tribes in the United States. Therefore, tremendous diversity exists among indigenous tribes. Indigenous worldviews have sustained the Cheyenne and Arapaho and other tribes. Research the treaties, Fort Wise, Fort Laramie, Arkansas, Medicine Lodge. Read, learn, even visit the Sand Creek Massacre site, which is a 3-hour drive from Denver. I encourage you to investigate and learn the different perspectives as together we work towards a more resilient future in the next 150 years. Naesh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Montoya, for reminding us of the people who called this place home long before and many centuries before us. It's a wonderful reminder to be grateful for this place and to respect the memory of those Natives people who have lived here, worked, laughed, and loved for so many generations. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce the man who literally wrote the book on Longmont, Erik Mason. Erik is the curator of history here at the Longmont Museum, responsible for the museum's historic object and archival collections. Among the exhibitions he's helped develop are the museum's core exhibition, Front Range Rising, and special exhibitions, John Empson, Longmont's Robber Baron, and World War I, Longmont and the Great War. Erik lives in a 1923 bungalow in Longmont's historic West Side neighborhood with his 2 cats. Ladies and gentlemen, Erik Mason.
Well, it is my honor to give us a little bit of This Is Your Life, Longmont. And of course, as Montoya has reminded us, the history of people in this area goes back far before the last 150 years. Indeed, uncounted millennia, people have lived in the St. Vrain Valley. And in more recent times, tribes such as the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute have called this area home. Next slide, please. In 1859, the lives of all the people who lived in Colorado changed dramatically when a small amount of gold was found in a tributary of Cherry Creek. Suddenly, 100,000 people set out for Colorado, and this generated a conflict that would ultimately lead to the forced removal of the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and the Ute, many of which have now returned to this area. In 1870, another dramatic event occurred which really had another profound impact, and that was the arrival of the railroad coming down from Cheyenne and coming east across the plains of Kansas. Next slide, please. It was the railroad that really was responsible for the birth of Longmont. And of course, birth is a relative term for a town. It was incorporated on February 2nd, 1871. And it began life as a young child called the Chicago, Colorado Colony. It was planned in Chicago, and they sent an advance party out to Denver in January of 1871 to choose a site for the new town. It was incorporated February 2nd as a location about 40 miles north of Denver. It was a planned community with the members contributing to its success. Well, most of the members anyway. One of them apparently was actually contributing to his own pockets. And as a result, pretty quickly the colony found itself in some pretty serious financial trouble. And it had to reorganize as the town of Longmont as a result. Next slide, please. In April of 1873, the railroad actually reached Longmont, and that turned out to be a very lucky thing, because only a few months after that, a major economic panic, the Panic of 1873, stopped all railroad construction all across the United States. Longmont was very fortunate. It had that rail link that allowed it to give its goods to markets across the country. Next slide, please. Some of those first products were wheat and flour, made here locally, grown by the farmers that had come to this area. Within a few years, Longmont also had a vegetable cannery. That was an important part of its early history. Next slide, please. The biggest of Longmont's early industries was, without a doubt, what became known as the Great Western Sugar Company. And sugar was a very labor-intensive product. Sugar beets required a lot of effort to grow. And so people came from all over the world to work in the fields around Longmont. They came, ethnic Germans from Russia came to this area. People came from Japan, and people came from New Mexico, Texas, and ultimately from Mexico itself, all of them arriving in this area to work in the fields and then moving on as they were able to prosper into new and better opportunities across Longmont. As late as the 1960s, Longmont remained very much an agricultural community, and it is said that the main topic of discussion in City Hall in the early 60s was sheep, sugar beets, and the water shortage. That would all change with the arrival of high technology. Next slide, please. The first of those big high-tech employers was the Federal Aviation Administration, building its air traffic control center on 17th Avenue in 1962. And then a few years later, IBM building a large plant between Boulder and Longmont, and then many, many companies followed that. Storage Technology, Miniscribe, Seagate, Amgen. The Longmont today is very much a high-tech center. One of the remarkable things about those people coming into this area is not only did they grow the community, but they also made people realize how much diversity enriched the community as highly educated, highly paid people from all over the world came to Longmont and made it their home. Longmont underwent its most dramatic period of growth. Longmont's population doubled from 1960 to 1970 and almost doubled again from 1970 to 1980. But it was in 1980 that an event occurred that would forever transform Longmont. Next slide, please. a rookie Longmont police officer with only a little bit of training on the job, shot and killed Juan Luis Garcia and Jeffrey Cordova after an altercation following a traffic stop on Main Street. This event could have torn Longmont apart, but the community pulled together. They decided not to respond with violence, not to respond with intimidation, but to work together to understand each side in the conflict and ultimately to join together and form a stronger community. Next slide, please. The last event that really demonstrated Longmont's resilience is one that many people watching probably remember. In 2013, we had a serious flood that tore through our community. And this was the repetition of a pattern that has occurred many times throughout Longmont history. In fact, there have been floods in 1864, 1894, 1921, 1935, and 1969. And it was in recognition that we live in a floodplain, in a part of nature where periodically we are going to experience high water, that forced the community to realize once again we needed to be resilient. And so Longmont embarked on a many year project to transform the St. Vrain River Valley so that the next time, and there will be a next time, there's a flood, it will not do the kind of damage that we saw in 2013. Would people who have lived here throughout the many thousands of years, the people who have inhabited this valley, recognize Longmont today? I don't know, but I think they could all agree that Longmont and the people who have lived here have always risen to the challenges, and they will do so again. Thank you.
Next, we have a video tribute from one of Longmont's most celebrated, if not most famous, former residents. He was born here in 1931, and although he holds the record here for getting the furthest away, his heart will forever remain tethered to this place. Ladies and gentlemen, astronaut Vance Brand. And this just in from Mission Control, I think we had some issues. So we will be back with that amazing segment on Vance Brand once we hear from Houston. So thanks for sticking with us. The good news is we have a wonderful guest with us tonight. It's truly a pleasure to be able to sit down with Karen Kanemoto Wood this evening. Your family has deep roots in Longmont, so thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you. It's an honor to be asked.
Great. Can you tell me just a little bit about your family's history here in Longmont?
Well, it started in the early 1900s when my grandfather
Pull it a little closer to you.
was in Hiroshima, Japan, and the railroads were looking for laborers and would go over to recruit young men. So he decided to come over, but right when he was going to come in 1908, the U.S. government stopped issuing visas. So he instead, with a friend, jumped onto a small freighter just bound for Mexico. They got off in Mexico, worked until they could earn enough money to get a train ticket to Canada, but along the way, when they reached Denver, they jumped off. So not only was he an immigrant, but he was an illegal immigrant.
Yeah.
But he knew of a person in the Denver area that was already working for the railroad and could help them get jobs. And that's what happened. They just started working on the railroad then. And then after the railroad work was completed, they all started farming. And once he decided to stay in Colorado, he was farming around LaSalle. Mm-hmm. That's when his parents said, well, we're sending you a wife. And it was the picture bride. You know, they just sent the picture, said, this is who we've chosen for you.
They just sent him a picture?
Yes, uh-huh.
And this is the family back?
This is his parents back in Japan.
Oh my gosh.
And so Setsuno Nakasaki came on the ship over to Seattle. He met her there. They
Wow.
got married and came back to LaSalle, and that's where Jim and Fumi, their first two children, were born. And then they
My.
moved to Longmont, to the Terry Lake area, and that's where my father, George, was born in 1919.
Wow. That's amazing. And I remember we spoke yesterday, and you had this great line about the picture that they sent your grandfather. And I thought this is so funny, and I think it really ties into what Montoya was talking about earlier about these very strong and hardworking women. So why don't you share that line?
Well, that was actually on my mother's side.
Oh.
So it was Jim and George that
Okay.
married the two Miyazaki girls. And so the picture of the Miyazaki family that you're seeing now, Jane is on the far left and Chio is on the far right. And they married the two boys. It was their father who was sent a picture.
Oh.
And he said, no way, she is not pretty. and the parents wrote back and said, you don't need pretty. You need a hard worker and a strong woman, and she is that. So they sent her anyway. And
Parents always know best, right?
that's right.
That's wonderful. Since your family has such deep roots here, can you talk a little bit about your experience growing up? Any memories that stand out to you?
Sure. Well, there's a picture of the combined family that I think they're showing now. This was a partnership that lasted their entire lives and even longer. So we really just all grew up together, working together on the farm. And it was really when one of the First National Bank loan officers made an offer to the family of 140 acres on South Main Street.
Oh my goodness.
That's where everything changed.
Yeah.
And at first my grandmother was very hesitant to do that because she had 4 guiding principles. One was you work hard and you save your money. 2 was you never bring shame to the family. 3 is you always give back to the community. And 4 is you don't owe money. And so to do a loan like that to buy that much land was very difficult for her. But luckily
Sure.
the boys convinced her that that was the way to go.
Right.
And that made a big difference, of course.
Yeah, I mean, 140
in the
acres.
location,
Yeah.
yes. And so they ended up with 350 acres over the years. But, you know, the Kanemoto Farm, and I think we have a photo of that as well, just to show you the location, it was right there on South Main. That house in the middle of the photo still stands. But on the one side, on the north side, is where the RTD station is right now. And on the south side of that photo is where the Kane building that houses the DMV is.
Oh.
And so you can kind of see where it all started for us.
287 when it was a dirt road.
287, yes. And then we had the Freshway Market, the vegetable stand that they started in 1938, and it was open for 30 years. And as you can see in the photo, there is the slave labor, all the children.
The kids. The kids.
Yeah. And, but really, you know, at that time, that was taken around 1958, and at that time, Longmont was really surrounded by Japanese farms. We had the Tanakas to the south, the Maidas to the east, and to the north were the Nishidas. And they all, in their heyday, were very successful, but it was, you know, just amazing to me to see how hard they all worked and how that first generation was so brave to just come at all, you know, to country and not know the language and everything. But then the second generation worked so hard so that their children could live better lives. And when you look at what they accomplished in just one lifetime, I just think it's incredible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know you said a great thing yesterday talking about your guys' transition from growing crops to growing houses, because obviously with that acreage and family history, that has a significant piece and was a pivotal change for your family and what it looked like for the next generation. So
it definitely was, because in the 1960s, first the FAA came to Longmont, followed by IBM. And suddenly there was a housing shortage. And that's when Jimmy decided, we'd make a lot more money growing houses than vegetables. And Jimmy was the idea guy. He was the visionary, and he was amazing. He was always looking for better ways to do things. A perfect partnership because the other three, George and Jane and Chio, they were all behind the scenes working with him to make all his dreams come true. And so it really just worked out great. But Jimmy was also involved in all kinds of community boards and everything, as were the two women as well. But he, through Rotary and Longmont Hospital and the Chino sister cities and everything, he also made connections with Japan and brought Japanese companies over to Longmont. And that's why, because of his connections, that the emperor came to visit Longmont in 1994. So the emperor of Japan came to our little town, and we were on the international map.
There you go. That was Longmont's debut. Yeah.
It was funny because one story I heard was that a man that was from Denver went to visit Japan after that. And when the Japanese person asked where he was from, he said Denver. And he said, "Oh, is that near Longmont?"
The best reversal of those two
That's
proximity
right.
terms, I do say. So because of that amazing acreage and growth for your family, and I think as a true testament to your grandmother's family values, you guys did give back significantly to the city of Longmont. Your family donated a generous amount of land that actually houses now the school administration building, the fire station on South Pratt Parkway, Burlington Elementary, Kanemoto Park, St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, Longmont's Buddhist Temple, and the first section of the St. Vrain Greenway. I feel like I get to benefit from this personally, as my husband and I were fortunate enough to buy our first house in Kanemoto Park, right near Kanemoto Park in Southmore Park. So can you just talk about some of the backstory behind that incredible contribution?
Well, as I said, it was, if you had good fortune, then you wanted to share it and give back to those people who made it possible. And that, along with the pagoda, that was the idea behind that too, was just showing gratitude for the acceptance of our family and the opportunities given our family. The people of Longmont are so amazing, as you know. They really are so accepting and kind. And so our family just wanted to give back to all the community because of how wonderful they'd all been to our family, all throughout the years. So,
Yeah.
and so the pagoda, it was just, put in Kanemoto Park and named the Tower of Compassion. And I think there's the picture that shows the different levels of each, or I'm sorry, the 5 different levels of the pagoda. And they never wanted it to be any kind of religious symbol, like a Buddhist symbol or anything. It really, they felt like compassion encompassed all religions.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's
something
nice.
everybody can have in common.
Yes, and it's so nice that Rotary and the City of Longmont really has, kind of adopted it as well as a symbol.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel like I get to have the wonderful opportunity to say thank you to you personally for that. So, wrapping up, do you have any wishes for the future of Longmont on its 150th birthday?
Well, yes, I do. And I'm sorry, but before we do,
Yeah.
there were 2 more pictures I think that they were wanting
Okay.
to show. And these I just put in there because everyone asked, because we're such a blended family, everyone's confused, like, who do you belong to? And
Who do you belong to?
So-
Who's your owner?
Yes.
Which parent?
So there is a picture of Jim with his 2 children, Ken and Joyce. And unfortunately, Chio had already passed away at that time, but there is also a photo of Chio. And then a photo of George and Jane's family with Dale and Gail, the twins, and myself and Ed. So that would be the last photo there. But yes, in fact, what I brought along was, because Jim used to talk to high school classes about the Japanese internment. And that was another thing that we were so grateful for, was during the war, during World War II. Ralph Carr, the governor at that time, was just so great about standing up for the Japanese American rights. And so rather than being incarcerated, like they were being on the West Coast and everything, we were treated very fairly. They did, of course, have to register with the sheriff and turn in their guns and cameras and lose their insurance and things like that. But they were allowed to, keep their homes and everything, and not like some of the others who were incarcerated and taken off to the camps. So Uncle Jimmy would go around and talk to the young people about what had happened. And I just came across this, he had kind of a wish for the future that I wanted to share with you.
Yes, please.
The greatness of this nation lies in its diversity, in its differences, and in the fact that we came from many different lands. We are better, stronger people because we can build on what the entire world has to share with us. We must not forget what happened in the past and be vigilant in our commitment to stand up to violations of civil rights, no matter who today's or tomorrow's victims may be, and to ensure that no group of Americans will ever again suffer the denial of their basic human rights under the Constitution of this great nation.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Uncle Jimmy wrote it very well.
Me too.
Thank you so much
Oh, you're welcome.
for
Thank
taking the
you.
time and sharing some of your family's story. We so appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's been an honor.
Our next guest will be joining us via recorded video thanks to the Longmont Sister Cities Association, an organization that develops and fosters relationships between people of many cultures. Please enjoy this birthday message from the mayor of Chino, Japan.
ロングモント市の皆さん、市政150周年、誠におめでとうございます。私は茅野市長の今井敦と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いをいたします。さて、ロングモント市と茅野市が姉妹都市提携を結んで30年以上が経ったわけでありますけれども、その間、多くの出会いがあり、そしてまたたくさんの友情が生まれました。今、ロングモント市と茅野市は友人として非常に深い絆で結ばれている、そんなふうに思っているところであります。これからもお互いが良き友人として共に歩み、そしてまた共に発展していく、そんなことを願っています。再び皆さんと会える日を心待ちにしています。その時を楽しみにしていますので、また今後ともよろしくお願いをいたします。ログモント市150周年、誠におめでとうございました。
Great. Well, I am thrilled to now be here with Olga Cordero. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Absolutely.
And let's just get right to it. I'd love to hear some of your family's history and your connection to Longmont.
Wonderful. Well, feliz cumpleaños, Longmont. Happy birthday, Longmont. Mi comunidad, my community. The word comunidad in Spanish, when you break it down, it's común, which is common, unidad, which is unity, which I was thinking about that this afternoon, and having been raised here, that's what I feel. I feel unity within my community, and there are some common threads that keeps us together. So, feliz cumpleaños, mi comunidad.
Oh, yes. I love that. Thank you.
So back in the 1960s, my parents, my dad and my uncle had this dream. They're from Durango, Mexico. And their dream was to come into the United States and provide for their family a different opportunity, a better life, and whatnot. So they participated in the Bracero program, and they came through Texas. I believe it's Del City or Del Rio, Texas, where they served several years of work in exchange for their residency. And so once that happened, they decided to come further north, there was family here in the Firestone area. They landed there for a little bit, and I want to say they worked the fields where Miss Karen was talking about. They provided some service there for a while, and then Butterball, or Longmont Foods back then, opened up.
Oh my goodness, the
It was-
Butterball plant.
Yes, the Butterball plant right there on Main Street and about 2nd Avenue. And they had an opportunity to work there. Well, 30 some odd years later, they retired there. They built a home on East 5th Avenue and Martin Street and raised 5 girls on my side of the family, and my uncle had 6 children on his side of the family.
Oh my goodness.
The fun part of that story is that together they bought a house on East 5th Avenue. We lived in the basement, and they lived upstairs. Together, my uncle and my dad saved money from working at Butterball, Longmont Foods, and went next door, knocked on the door, and said, we'd love to purchase this house.
Oh my gosh.
And so the story goes on and on, but it's a
I feel like
beautiful
you get
story.
desperate when you have 11 children in one house. You're like, quick, just go knock next door. I don't know. We
It
got to
was the
solve
most-
this.
It was the most beautiful thing. We would just lift each other up and probably toss each other out of the window at some time.
I mean, with that many, you don't need TV. You just have 11 children entertaining. You are the sitcom. Like,
I
that's
wonder what
amazing.
our neighbors thought back in the day.
Why didn't we get them? We should have asked. Continue.
It was great. So we attended the Skyline Feeder, Rocky Mountain Elementary, Columbine Elementary. My parents worked really hard. I think at some point, it's that story where you walk 10 feet or a mile uphill in snow.
Both ways.
Both ways.
Both
yeah.
ways. In sequence.
In,
Makes it way harder. Drag resistance.
Yeah, and as somebody mentioned before, I think it was Montoya who talked about no social media or toys. Somebody was mentioning
Yeah.
that, and we would entertain ourselves, and we would teach each other, school and language and reading, and it was an exciting time, and ultimately it was to make our family proud. It was that integrity piece of it. So. Yeah, great time growing up. We look back at some of the exciting pieces of Longmont, because here we're celebrating 150 years. You and I were talking earlier today, and there was a question that you had asked, what was your favorite part of growing up in Longmont, right? And genuinely, there were lots of really exciting times, but I keep going back to the time that I would go out into the community to translate or interpret for my dad. So if there was, let's say, a washer we needed to buy for our house, we went up north. I don't know if people remember where Fred Schmidt was, up north. And so I'd translate, and my dad would make me feel like I was just the most special person because I was able to do this in 2 languages, right? I think Firestone might have been over by where Pump House Brewery is now. I think Firestone Tires.
Yep,
and we went
it
to
was. Because the chamber office is right next door, and it was part of the garage.
Right,
So, yeah.
right. And I remember it changed into Gold's Gym, or there was another gym or something. But going down...
Erik Beeman.
I know,
No.
I'm trying...
What was it, Erik?
But that was such a proud moment, which actually affirmed the fact that being bilingual, bicultural, was such a gift. And it continues to be. So all of you out there who are bilingual, trilingual, feel proud, be excited, and use your language and your culture to build each other up, because it's super special. I think that was part of the most special thing growing
That's
up.
wonderful. And that's what makes Longmont so special, too. It's all of us together that make it what we all
Yeah.
love and continue to love.
Learning so much about Longmont today.
Yeah. You also work for the St. Vrain Valley School District. I wonder if you have any insight about our little Long Monsters and the future for Longmont.
Oh gosh, that is part of the most exciting part of who I am and who I've become, is growing up in this community. I graduated from Skyline High School back in the 1900s. I keep saying that and I laugh at myself. So I graduated there in '89 and then went on to Front Range Community College and then CU Boulder and got my master's in counseling. And I was able to provide counseling services as a school counselor, which, by the way, it is National School Counselor Week So
This week?
This week, so please celebrate
Well.
your counselors, school counselors. So I did that for about 21 years. And then I have the privilege of working now in the Department of Student Services doing equity and engagement work. And it has always been a part of who I am, probably because of the diverse background that I've had and I've been fortunate and privileged to have. But doing this work is so important. And I think about going back to going up and down Main Street with my dad. There was one time we got home and he and my mom shared a story about a sign that said no dogs or Mexicans allowed. It was a restaurant. And so, you know, I look back then and then I see how far we've come and how much more work that we need to do as a community. As you were saying earlier, the 1980 shooting, we lived down the street from the family and our parents knew each other. And it could have gone either way. But to see how Longmont was committed to coming together in times of adversity, that gives me hope in the work that I do. We have a superintendent who is supporting our efforts in moving forward and listening to our calls to action and providing that space for conversation that needs to be had. So what I would say to our future students is speak your truth, be proud of who you are, see color, see the uniquenesses, and celebrate them. That's what I would say, because somebody gave us that grace, we give that back. If somebody chose not to do that, I don't spend my time or energy there. We move forward. As Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see. That was definitely something that was instilled in our family, in our community, in our culture, in that house of 11 kids and 4 parents. I think that those roots is very much a part of what Longmont is. Yeah. Coming together, it's that comunidad piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so wonderful to have you in such a great leadership role with our students so
I
that you
appreciate
can be
that.
such a wonderful voice to
I
that.
appreciate that. Our students are the real work, though. They're the example. They're those shining stars. I've seen it for myself. Yeah.
Any other wishes that you would like to impart for Longmont's 150th birthday?
Oh gosh, just that hope for equity, that hope for equity and unity in times of challenges. We come together because that's who we are. Longmont, we are a loving community. We are a community that will unite no matter what. Floods, a shooting, and a terrible loss there. You go back to the lands that belong to others. And we're 2021 today. We have an opportunity to keep moving forward. Yeah. I'll be 50 this year. So I'm
You're a third
third.
of the birthday.
I'm a third of it. When somebody said 1871, I loved it. So
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Olga, for joining us this evening, for sharing some stories and some
Absolutely.
hopes for the future.
it's been an honor. Feliz cumpleaños, Longmont.
Yes, indeed. All right, now we have a very special birthday message from our other sister city in Ciudad Guzman.
Hola, les habla su amigo Pepe Guerrero, presidente municipal de Zapotlán el Grande, Jalisco, en México. Hoy me dirijo a la ciudad de Longmont, Colorado, en los Estados Unidos. ¿Por qué me dirijo a ustedes? Porque somos ciudades hermanas. Tanto Longmont como Zapotlán son ciudades hermanas desde hace mucho tiempo. Y hoy Longmont está de fiesta, cumple 150 años de la fundación de su ciudad. Por eso en esta ocasión mando mis felicitaciones para todos ustedes. Enhorabuena, que sigan disfrutando de este bonito evento. Al final, ustedes saben que en México tiene una ciudad hermana que se llama Zapotlán el Grande. Con mucho cariño para todos ustedes, les deseamos lo mejor. Que sigan disfrutando de este maravilloso aniversario. Muchas gracias.
And this is also in from Houston. I think we can go back to Vance Brand and hear his amazing story. So we're going to take you there now.
I'm honored to be here talking with you. To gain some perspective, let's go back to the 75th anniversary. I remember experiencing that I was about 15 years old, a freshman in high school at the old Longmont High School on Main Street. And well, it was 1946. Longmont's a different city now, quite different. Back then, it was a farming center. All the farmers came into town on Saturday night to do their shopping and to socialize. Main Street used to be crowded and on Saturday nights. And well, it was, I think Longmont had a population of 7,000 to 8,000 people. And it was just after World War II, rather. My grandfather, Fred DeVoe, actually managed several pickle processing plants for Libby McNeil Libby. And he had a plant with many tanks filled with salt water and pickles just south of 3rd Avenue on the east side of town. Back then, he was on the city council, and I think on one of his or two of his terms, it was during the tenure of the renowned mayor, Ray Lanyon, who at that time also owned the Longmont Times-Call newspaper. My father, Rudy Brand, was a veterinarian and he took care of both large and small animals. Back then, there were a lot of large animals in the countryside around Longmont. And he took care of small animals too. He had an office on 3rd Avenue close to Main Street, right across the street from the Imperial Hotel. He lived in a time when veterinarians didn't operate out of their offices as much as they traveled around to go to wherever the sick horse or cow or whatever it was. He raced his small car around parts of 3 counties as a veterinarian. And well, I would say those counties were the north end of Boulder County, the west end of Weld County, and up around Estes Park in Larimer County, places like that. Back then, around 1946, there was still an old pioneer of the time of Longmont's founding that lived in Longmont. His name was Bill Bowes, and he ran a livery stable, which was on the corner of 6th and Pratt. He he told us stories, and one of them was that he remembered when Longmont was simply a grassy plain on top of, north of the St. Vrain River Valley. And he said there were a few cactus, a lot of grass. Well, that was going back a long way, but he ran this livery stable, which later was torn out, and there's something else there now. On the 75th anniversary, though, there was a big parade on Main Street, I remember, led by Frank Lumiller on his beautiful Palomino horse. And also then right behind him, 3 or 4 World War I and II veterans carrying American flags and the Colorado flag. And so there was a big celebration there. And generally, celebrations like that also gravitated toward Roosevelt Park. But now, your population is pushing 100,000. Many of you work in the Denver area or in the suburbs around the area. Farmland around Longmont has become urbanized in many cases, and you have a variety of industries. Back in 1946, we had 2 or 3 industries in Longmont. One was the Great Western Sugar Factory, which still stands, and another was Cuter Amson plant for processing vegetables and that sort of thing. But now your industry is very diverse and even includes aerospace industry and aircraft related industries and biology related industries. So Longmont's come a long way. It's changed with the times, which is good and necessary. And so I think there's a lot to congratulate Longmont for. This is Vance Brand, and I'm wishing you a very happy 150th birthday. So live it up. Thank you. Bye.
Wow! So that's a time capsule. Who knew? Do you think that if we push this cart at 88 miles per hour, we could go back to the future?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, my friend wanted me to ask that. So excellent. Now that we know that, let's unbox this thing, Erik.
All right.
For all of you at home, he's untying the box, delicately putting the white ribbon to the sides. I can't breathe. So Twitter-pated. Ooh. There's stuff in the box, guys. Tell us about it.
So these are scrapbooks that were created at the Quasqua Centennial of Longmont in 1996.
The Quasqua Centennial, everyone. It comes back.
In fact, here is a letter to be read at the opening of the time capsule that says, "We realize that many of those present at the opening of this time capsule will have lived and worked in Longmont. The city around you will bear evidence of your effort and wisdom. We anticipate and hope that these contents will pale in comparison to your reality." I don't know if they would quite appreciate our reality today.
They probably expected more people right here, but joke's on them. There's even more out and about. Oh, look! Oh, that happy birthday confetti reminds me of when I was a child. It would get everywhere. Do we want to lift it? Can they see it? Can we lift it? I feel like this is very national treasure.
Education. The Longmont Museum, what do you know? Churches. Houses. This was Longmont 25 years ago. And a good bit of history as well.
Wow. My personal favorite was the happy birthday confetti. Really took me back. Is there any other goodies in here?
See here. So we've got another one. This is a scrapbook by Lindsay Longmont, once known as the Chicago, Colorado colony. Lots of color prints. Remember those?
Fancy. Oh, I remember turning in my little disposable camera.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That little twang that the shutter made when you would
Yeah.
take a picture.
It was a very satisfying click. Those were definitely printed. As one of the instant developments.
Oh, and there's a color.
Nice.
Colored by Lindsay. Well, let's see. Wonder how Lindsay was probably about 30 years old now.
Do you know the age of Lindsay who made the scrapbook when she made it?
Well, since she
1A.
says 1A, I'm guessing she must have been a first grader. So,
You have to be a pretty amazing
But,
first grader
yeah.
to be the one who gets the scrapbook in the box. Here's looking at you, Lindsay. Well done. She's probably like, oh my gosh, I would have spent way more time coloring the lines if I knew this was going to be broadcast. What's underneath?
well, let's see here.
It's the biggest one, Eric. We have to get to it. I don't want to touch it. I don't have gloves. But I want to touch it so badly. Oh, lots of letters.
It's a really big scrapbook.
Really big. Oh, they use the Microsoft Word banner font variation where you can make it get smaller like a pennant flag. Guys, this was top of the line creative design 25 years ago. I mean, the prodigy of Longmont.
More.
City's
Clippings
founders,
of the
lured by
founders.
state's charms. What a headline. We have this hilarious old advertisement in the chamber advertising Longmont, and it says, "Linger a little longer in Longmont." And I'm like, wow, yes. And we've all been lingering here for 150 years. Great. Turkey for
Pumpkin
every
recipe.
occasion. Longmont Foods.
Yep.
We're in here. Oh my gosh, all these houses.
Houses of early Longmont.
I mean, some of them in these old neighborhoods, they look just like that. I think the preservation of history in Longmont, too, is so special because there's always the new and the noteworthy, but when you look at this and you're like, I've walked past that house. That's also pretty amazing. Oh, I'm glad we dig to the bottom.
Here we are.
All right, now you carefully put all that back. Oh,
This is only half of the time capsule.
what? Where did we not get the whole thing?
So when they were creating the time capsule, they ended up getting it a little smaller than would fit these items.
Oh, I see.
So once the ground thaws, they will dig up the time capsule that's in front of the Civic Center. And sometime we'll have another grand decapsulating.
Oh, decapsulating. We were just talking about what's the verb when you unbox a capsule. So there is a physically buried capsule.
There is indeed, yeah. It is in front of the Civic Center. And so we will open that at some point at a later celebration.
When it's not very cold and windy out. Great. Now, no one go geocaching the city's capsule in front of the Civic Center. Eric, thank you so much. This was quite spectacular. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
It's exciting to see it unveiled.
It really was. Uncapsulated. Decapsulated, what did we say? Oh, I forgot. Great. Well, thank you so much, Eric. But don't go anywhere, friends at home who just saw the amazing contents of our time capsule. We still have a stirring rendition of Happy Birthday to get to. So I would like to invite the members of City Council who are able to join us this evening, and we are going to start our rendition of Happy Birthday with accompaniment, of course, by members of the Longmont Symphony Orchestra and their music director, Elliot Moore. Take it away, maestro! get to look at it from very, very spread out. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening to celebrate Longmont's sesquicentennial. Special thanks to the mayor, Montoya Whitman, Erik Mason, Vance Brand, our sister cities, Chino, Japan, and Ciudad Guzman, Mexico, Karen Kanemaru Wood, Olga Cordero, Longmont City Council, and the Longmont Symphony Orchestra. And to all of you, Longmonsters, here's to the next 150 years.